India is always an active participant in Human Development Index. Why? Because our aim is not just about securing the ranks or spots, but our aim is to understand how we can make the life of people better. Probably, if you now look into India, this is the best country in the world which is able to provide maximum employment to people across the globe. Factor of knowledge and understanding is not just from the educational qualification. It's also from understanding the nature, understanding the surroundings, the environment where you live in. Good morning and welcome to the third session, Chapter 1, Unit 1, first semester BCom, Pre-Reforms of Indian Economy, where we are going to talk about Human Development Index. In economics, we have seen several kinds of index. We might be talking about a wholesale index, or retail index. We might be talking about cost price inflation index, so many factors. But then this concept of human development index is being gathering importance of late. The Human Development Index is a statistically developed, compiled by United Nations since 1990 to measure various countries' level of social and economic development. Now that's where I'm going to add a bit of twist to this entire chapter. Why? Because we have been measuring only about the economic values. We have been only talking about the credit, debit, the trade, the balance, the growth and other factors. But today we are talking about social factors in economics, which is quite interesting, which means we are now going to bring in the human development aspect of economics. Now let's see here. It's composed of four principal areas, mainly the schooling, expected years of schooling that we are going to talk about, and a life expectancy at birth and the gross national income. So what we're going to look into it in short is education. We're going to look into the income. We're going to look into the birth rate, that's the lifespan altogether, and then of course a little bit on the GI factors. Now, this is a different composition altogether, which has been brought up by the United Nations in order for the people to understand the importance of Human Development Index overall. So when I go further, I just want you to understand how the measurement system is being going in place. Now, let's try to understand the measurement system. And this measurement is applicable for each and every country across the globe. So definitely when United Nations came up with this index, they had kept in mind the various countries of the world, including that of the underdeveloped countries, the developed and the developing countries, and there has been a benchmark that has been created. Now the HDI was to be in terms of emphasizing the people and their capabilities. Let us pause here for a minute. Why? Because we're going to talk about people. Definitely, yes, that's where the nation comprises of, and the capability. So this is something new that we are going to look into. When you look into a country like India, you talk about a 1.3 billion plus population, which is a very, very huge number to even digest. Now, when you talk about such a big number, definitely the skill sets are also varied. They are completely diverse in nature, and everybody has got a unique set of talent to be displayed. So for a country like India, when I'm going to measure the Human Development Index, the exercise is not going to be that easy. It is definitely going to be complicated. It is going to go in a long circle altogether. It's going to go in a very, very big way, in a big manner, trying to assess the development alone. But nevertheless, India is always an active participant in Human Development Index. Why? Because our aim is not just about securing the ranks or spots, but our aim is to understand how we can make the life of people better. So there was a time in the last 15-20 years where we have been speaking about the capability factor, where we have been talking about the ability, the skills and talents that needs to be projected before. This is the right time, I would say, where the government of India has taken the stand of understanding and moving further in terms of the developmental activity. So definitely, this is one of the most important factor that I can ever talk about in terms of the Human Development Index. Now, moving further, the HDI uses components such as average annual income, the educational expectations to rank and to compare factors. It has been criticized by the social advocates for not representing a broad enough measure of quality of life by the economists. Now, why? Because if you're going to consider or if you're going to compare Finland versus India, now, there are the broader comparisons that have to be taken into picture. You cannot just do a head-on-head comparison between these two countries. Why? Because the culture, the caste, creed, religion, the various factors that governs India is totally different from that of the lifestyle in Finland. So what the economist always felt that you would not be able to get a correct answer, a correct measurement rather. Why? Because each and every country has got a unique lifestyle and culture behind them. So this cannot be made as a common factor. This cannot be laid down as one single benchmark altogether. But nevertheless, what we are trying to do is that go as close as possible in terms of measuring the information that's been presented. So this is definitely a very, very important factor that we are talking about. Now, as you see the world map, there are many countries which are marked in green. There are some countries which are marked in red. Now, that doesn't mean that the red and green is going to just diversify, differentiate and put a rank altogether, but that just says us that there is some potential evaluation that needs to be kept. Now, let's go through the slide altogether to understand better. Now, this is in place to emphasis on individuals, or more precisely on the opportunities to realize satisfying work and lives. Now, evaluating a country's potential for individual human development provides supplementary metric that we have to look into for evaluating the country's level of development, besides what we're going to look, the standard economic or the GDP statistics. So one side, what we were actually measuring was only the GDP and the income factor. Now, we are not just concerned about this. We are also trying to fit in several other ratios apart from GDP, which is going to talk to us or which is going to tell us about the growth factors. So this is definitely quite a challenging aspect that we are talking about. Now, the other thing that we come across in a broad spectrum altogether here is that many countries have shown that development, have shown the progress over the last few years because of the environmental changes, because of the maturity in terms of trade, in terms of lifestyle and other factors. And still, there are countries which are below the par, below the comparison levels. Why? Because they have not been still ranked, they have not got the access to the resources, and they have not been able to progress altogether. Now, moving further, how is it exactly measured? The first thing that we are going to measure here is knowledge and understanding. Now, this is very, very important. How many people in your country have the knowledge and understanding about the system, about the country, about the orders, about the economic sectors, how the lifestyle is being going on? So this factor of knowledge and understanding is not just from the educational qualification. It's also from understanding the nature, understanding the surroundings, the environment where you live in. So this factor is a serious one which is going to evaluate deeply about each and every citizen and their understanding towards a nation. Followed by, we are also going to talk about the long and healthy life and an acceptable standard of living. Health has always been a priority for many of us. But when you talk about the health factor, the health sector in India, that never rose up, that was never taken up so seriously like how it was taken after the pandemic. Till the pandemic happened, people believed that health is just an optional factor that you keep talking about with your friends or relatives. But after the pandemic, health became the #1 priority for each and every one of us. The very instance, the very thought of survival became a question mark. So today, living a healthy life itself is a very big boon, I would like to say. So HDI definitely would look into it, measuring whether you are able to live a long and healthy life, followed by acceptable standard of living. In India, we know that there is a standard of living, but that standard is not defined. Why do I say this? It's because in India, what we try to do is that we just try to live for today. We just try to live within the four walls of our house, of the society, trying to make everybody believe that we are also living a happy life. But in reality, the problems that is being faced, that is from the public infrastructure, the roads, water, electricity, and so many other factors are unspoken. Or probably even if they are spoken wide enough, the action is less taken. So what happens here is that the geometrical components on which we are talking about are quite complicated. And when you are going to be normalized and going to be measured between the scale of 0 and 1, definitely we don't score that high altogether. So that's how when we measure the HDI, the more you go closer to 1, that means your standard of living is very high. You rank on the top orders of the Human Development Index. Moving further, the health aspect, as I was talking about, this is very, very important, which talks about the life expectancy, the birth of each and every person, how much years which we live, and what are all the components that governs the entire factor here. So the health component is definitely going to speak in volumes about us. So we try to look into it, and you see the life expectancy in India is about 85.3. That's what we have been talking about. Now, education, which is measured in the number of years of schooling that you have undergone, what is the expected level of schooling in your country, how the schooling has been, starting from the primary education to that of secondary to the high school, and finally up to your graduation. In India, we made that schooling compulsory up to the age of 14 years, and now we have tried to extend it to 16 years. We have been trying to make people more literate. We have been trying to make people more skill and talent oriented, but nevertheless, this factor is going to be counted in the HDI scale. Now, how is the HDI measured? The economic metric chosen to represent the standard of living is the GNI per capita income that we are talking about on the purchasing power parity, a very, very common metric that is going to be used to reflect the average income. Now, how much is the average income? An income that is needed to live an ordinary life, but yet a comfortable life where you are able to satisfy all your basic needs. So that is very much important. And the GNI per capita is 75,000, which is equal to 0, whereas the GNI per capita is also 100. Now, you see that up to 1 will be measured at this level and 0 is measured at 100. So if you look at the range, I'm talking about 100 to that of 75,000. It's a huge number. It's a huge variation that we are talking about here. Now, the HDI rankings, let's go to understand the rankings here. If you see here, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Hong Kong, Australia, all have been on the top 5 in terms of living. In fact, recently I would like to say Netherlands, which has also been on the top, Austria, which is also there on the top. All these countries have been able to develop, have been able to go further. The reason being is that they have been able to give a very good standard of living to their citizens, followed by the higher per capita income. Their purchasing power parity is also very good. Plus, the schooling, health system, everything is on place. Primarily, these are the countries where I would like to say that their systems are so standardized that a person does not have to really take up so much of worry or tension in terms of living in their country. They are more secure. They have a very simple, straightforward life where everything is in place. So for a citizen in these countries, it is not much of complication that includes altogether. Followed by, when we talk about this HDI, we also need to talk about the limitations. Now, what are the limitations that we have been talking about? The HDI does not specifically reflect quality of life factors. Why? Because it's very generic in nature, such as empowerment, overall feelings that you have about the security in recognition to this human development aspects. Now, let me just throw a light here on this factor. When you look at some of the countries like Australia, Finland, or suddenly when you talk about Switzerland or France and all this country, sometimes on the news, you might be seeing that there has been a rapid mass killing using the weapons, or there have been shooting incidents, or there have been some bomb blast incidents, or some kind of terrorist incidents which keep happening. Now, these are all negative news that happen in such a secured country altogether. But when these incidents happen, they suddenly start questioning about the minds of people who feel that this is highly insecure. You cannot live a life like this. In India, Pakistan, China, or any other country for that matter, I don't mean to say that we would take this news in a lesser stand. We do understand the impact of terrorism. We do understand the impact of any other antisocial elements that come into picture. But we have taken it seriously. We have taken it as a part of life. But for the other countries, the mindset has not been included. We have not been able to take into factor the feelings of the people, the secured lifestyles and other things. So definitely this is a drawback, though it is trying to bring in an composite index altogether. The next one is that examination and evaluation of countries HDI are best done when for example, when you start looking in the rate of economic growth, expansion of employment opportunities, or the success of initiative taken. So probably if you now look into India, this is the best country in the world which is able to provide maximum employment to people across the globe. And we all know that most of the Indians are today heading multinational companies in various roles and designations and posts. So they have been successful enough in terms of ruling the multinational companies, and at the same time, they've also been successful in terms of providing employment opportunities within the country. So these factors of bringing in that positivity, bringing in that ray of hope that the country is developing has not been included in HDI, which is also another drawback that we are looking into it. Followed by, several economists also say that HDI is essentially redundant as a result of high correlations among HDI, because very common factors that are found within certain countries, and the components are very, very simple in terms of measures of income per capita. Now, when you look into the gross national income altogether, that correlates very highly with the overall HDI and the other two components. Why I tell you this is that if a nation is already doing good in terms of economic value, in terms of system, in terms of quality of life and living factors, automatically the income would also be high. So this is probably what most of the economists feel, is that it's very simple and it's already preset kind of a situation. So these are some of the limitations that we are noticing in terms of HDI. Followed by, given these strong and consistent correlations, that would be simpler and clear that the per capita income is a direct valuation to your country. How higher the standard of living, higher will be the income. So it's a very, very straight line correlation, and definitely if you start looking into this factor, all these countries and will have organizations which pay very high to their citizens. So automatically the standard of living would also be good, and people would directly get linked in terms of the per capita income. Followed by, is HDI good or bad? So let me just come to that decision stand, saying that is it good or bad? Rather than just making a decision here and pronouncing the verdict, let me go back and say that the higher the HDI, it's better, which means to say that it is essentially a benchmark that needs to be evaluated so that you are able to understand your living standards inside the country. So this is, a measurement that has been taken by United Nations to make their country internally competitive so that you are able to give a better quality of life to the people. Followed by, which I would also like to say here, education, healthcare, living standards, the per capita income, the purchasing power parity, all these things are actually trying to make you understand that these things are mandatory. These things are needed today for you to live a better lifestyle. So it is not just an opportunity, I would say, but it is the need of the hour for a country like India to redefine itself and go up the ladders of the HDI ranking. Now, the bottom line, what is that we have got in conclusion altogether? Now, this is a level of prosperity that we are talking about. Non-economic factors are also included with the economic factors, and the UN is trying to improve on the HDI, relatively trying to bring in more composite factors. Now, what I would like to tell at the end, at the concluding factor, is that this is very, very important for us. Why? Because this is trying to make you arguably better, trying to make the country more prospective, more better in terms of standards of living. So definitely we need to work towards the Human Development Index and make India a better nation in future. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been spoken through this slide would be of great help to you, both in terms of practical and also in terms of the theory. Now, in the upcoming sessions, we would be talking about poverty. We would be talking about the other factors of the economic reforms. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.